Welcome to this week's Two Men and Men in the Middle. This is where two men in the middle of the country get together and talk about politics, current events, and other fun stuff. I'm Craig Huey.
I'm Brandon Kinnig.
Well, Brandon, it's been about 8 days maybe since we did a podcast, and there's 10
Nothing's
years
happened.
worth of stuff. I was reminded, somebody
boy.
said the Lennon quote the other day, that decades go by and nothing happens, and weeks go by and decades happen. It feels like in the last 8 to 9 days, a lot. I mean, we're still not 2 weeks out from Trump's assassination.
Yeah, and that almost
weird
feels
does
like
that
ancient
sound? I
history
know.
at this point. Yeah.
So the biggest thing that's happened, of course, is Biden has officially stepped away from the race. That happened on Sunday. We'll get to that and its aftermath with Harris. But we want to back up a little bit and just kind of recap the Republican National Convention and talk a little bit about how that ended, J.D. Vance's speech, Trump's speech, and what are the Republicans now moving forward? Because I think now that their convention is behind them, the vice president is selected, we have a really good feel for what the Republicans are going to be in this cycle and who they're going to market to going forward.
I agree. I think
As the past Republican in the room, I'll let you start. Give me your general impressions of the Republican convention and just where is the party at this point?
well, this wasn't your grandfather's convention, Republican convention. It definitely wasn't your father's Republican convention. As somebody who was an RNC delegate in 2012 in Tampa, the convention that nominated Mitt Romney, this was unrecognizable to me.
So nobody shouted it's Romney Mania and ripped their shirts off or anything
Nobody
like
did that
Okay.
there. Yeah, nobody, tried to identify with their dear leader with, patches on their ears. There wasn't this fight, fist in the air, this weird, just kind of cult-like, cult unity with their standard bearer. The other thing was that Mitt Romney was not seated in a box. He was this special emperor coming to his, placement in the Coliseum. So it was interesting where they had Trump positioned and where they would lead him to the box and they would have special music playing. That wasn't a facet at the RNC. And yeah, the speakers, when I was there, spoke about their support for Romney and why his policies would be better. But, it wasn't cloaked in this just veneer of adoration where it was oh, I love Trump and I'm proving my loyalty to him and Trump is the best and Trump is and the, I would say, mythological status that is around Trump now because of the shooting. Many of the speakers openly said that he was saved by God. He's here for a higher purpose.
That's standard part of mythology now.
And so that was very bizarre because, again, that was not anything you saw at past conventions. There was a assortment of characters. Hulk Hogan, ripping his shirt off. You had Dana White, so you had the whole kind of UFC. This was a convention that played heavily towards young males.
Absolutely.
I think that you saw that first and foremost. And it was also interesting, they tried to pepper in policy and criticisms of society under Biden. You had a mother who lost a child to fentanyl who spoke. But I also thought it was very interesting that the party of personal responsibility is gone. So the mother who lost her son to fentanyl, which is completely awful, but she blamed Biden and say it's his fault. There was no semblance there among any of the people that they had personal responsibility for any of the things that occurred in their life. Another one was, I'm blanking out on the reality show. There was the daughter of that.
Chris Lee.
Yes.
Chris Lee knows best. Yeah.
Yes, of the Chris Lees. So she spoke. I'm like, what is this? Why is she there?
Grifter's going to grift.
And so apparently she was trying to make a parallel between her parents being in prison for tax fraud and invasion to Donald Trump and fairly prosecuted. It's no, your parents did something illegal.
Sure.
They were prosecuted and went to prison. How is this? We're normalizing now, just the victimhood of people who commit crime. This is the Law and Order party. What is this?
It was. I don't want to spend a ton of time on the convention because I always find Republican conventions weird to begin with.
There's always some semblance of that.
This one,
Clint Eastwood talking to the empty chair.
Perfect. Thank you. That is a perfect example. Because they don't have a ton of production value to them, the Republicans.
Yeah.
And it shows when they try to put on a highly produced event. I think the things that got me, the things worth talking about is, number one is J.D. Vance's speech. And again, how you talked about it. Hillbilly Elegy was a lot about taking control of yourself, taking control of your agency, stepping forward, overcoming your circumstances through personal effort. That is not the speech that
No.
J.D. Vance is giving anymore. Oh, by the way, J.D. Vance's mom didn't get hooked on fentanyl. She got hooked on prescription drugs that she
Yes.
stole from the hospital that she worked at.
And that's
But-
all recounted in his book. Yeah.
Correct. And what J.D. Vance made very clear is this pivot that's happened in the Republican Party. Before it was small government, pull you up by your bootstraps. You're responsible for your own life. If things didn't work out for you, that's mostly your fault. Now the Republicans have pivoted to the government does things to people. It makes winners, it makes losers. And part of the bargain that you get with Vance and Trump is we're going to make the government work for you in the way that it's worked for other people in the past. It's not a function of the free market that manufacturing jobs left Ohio. It was the personal policies of whoever was running the government at that point in time that made decisions that impacted you. It's time the government works for this section of the population, not for others. That's what I got from J.D. Vance.
Yeah. Well, and I think, this is the challenge he's going to face. We've talked at length, and the media has talked at length about his pivot from being an anti-Trump figure, somebody who intimated that Trump could be America's next Hitler, to now being, super pro-Trump. But I think the underlying issue that has not been discussed is that he is now rebuking the central premise of Hillbilly Elegy. So as we talked about, his whole entire book was actually about individual responsibility, pointing blame within the people from his hometown and from Appalachia, saying that they hadn't done enough for themselves, that that it was a culture where driven by victimhood. But now he's made this full 180-degree pivot where he's saying, no, you are the victims. It's government's fault. They failed you, and society has failed you, and you should be angry. You should be upset. That was not what his book was about.
No, it wasn't.
And so it's fascinating to me because I think anybody who's kind of a Johnny-come-lately to J.D. Vance, which a lot of the MAGA faithful are, they did read his book back in the day. They weren't involved because he wasn't speaking to them.
No.
He was speaking to
No.
elites. They're going to go back and read his book, and it's going to be at odds with the public persona that he is now.
Is anybody in MAGA going to read a book? I mean, come on.
Maybe they won't. They'll watch the movie. They'll watch a Netflix movie.
I feel like you threw that one up to me as an easy one, but I don't think anybody's reading that book.
Probably not. They'll watch a Netflix film with Amy Adams and Glenn Close, and it's not going to resonate.
The Vance speech stuck out to me only as this is the day. This is the speech. This is the end. And I think for you and I, what it means is anytime we talk about the Republican Party, we need to stop and make sure we're accurately talking about the 2024 Republicans, not the 96, 98 Republicans that we remember, that we wish they were.
Not even the 2012 Republicans.
Not even that. It is the core pieces of Republicanism, as I've known them, have been pretty much kicked to the curb, and the Vance selection and that convention just solidifies it.
Well, the Republican Party was always built around three pillars, so social conservatism, fiscal conservatism, and national security strength. So the national security pillar is obliterated. That doesn't exist anymore.
That's just money we shouldn't be spending on people that are not Americans.
Right, and the fiscal responsibility pillar is obliterated with the debt and just unregulated, irresponsible tax cuts. The policy now where the Republicans have flipped and they're in favor of tariffs, which are essentially taxes that filter their way down to consumers in the form of higher prices. So that's gone. And even the social conservatism plank is wobbly because it's really based on whatever their dear leader, his thoughts of particular day. The Republicans stripped an abortion plank out of the party platform because Trump didn't want it in there. That's notable because they've had an abortion plank in the platform since 1973. But nobody even batted an eye because it's a personality cult now.
Well, and they've said the age of big government is over. It's I don't. What do the Republicans believe the size and shape of the government should be anymore?
Well,
I really don't know.
With MAGA Republicans, it's not the big government is over. It's just going to pivot to big government working for their key interests and their key
big government's going to work
constituencies.
for us now.
Yes.
Make big government work for you is really kind of what they're talking
That's
about.
the central premise, yeah.
So let's get on to Trump's speech now. Trump's speech set a record at 93 minutes, and that was just him rubbing one out, showing how studly I am, that I got shot and I can stand up here and talk for 3 minutes longer than Slick Willie did, or I think even Trump did a couple of years ago.
Right.
93 minutes.
He beat his own record.
93 minutes. It is scientifically proven no human can pay attention to another human talk for 93 minutes. So he just did that as a flex that I can sit and make you listen to me even when you don't want to because I'm Donald Trump and you don't have to.
Saying hi to random people, just pontificating
Like 20
about
minutes,
everything.
just jerking off in front of everybody just because you have to watch me. The part about the speech that I want to focus on is a lot of people that I listen to on both the right and the left, but mostly on the right, talked about the first 22 minutes of that speech as some sort of high political oratory that should go down in United States history as being one of the most effective, emotional, and just one of the best political presentations when it comes to political speech. I'm talking about the first 20 minutes where he talks about being shot. I just wanted to go through this and just tell everybody, if anybody is telling that to you, they're completely gaslighting you.
Yeah.
That speech sucked ass from start to finish. The first 22 minutes when he was talking about being shot sounded like a 2-year-old was telling you a story. Why Trump's speech sticks out to me so much, one is because it was so god-awful, but second, it was, this is all beatable. Nobody really wants this. This is a punt position for people. People are accepting this because they don't know what other options are available. That speech, I think, is the moment where Democrats said, we need to get really serious about this. Because if we can make a change, we can beat that guy. I don't think anybody really wants that guy. We can do this, but we've got to get our person out of the way. But that was what that speech said to me. Trump is beatable. Trump is not going to yield to any of the forces that are around him. This is a base race, and that's all I'm capable of doing.
And he hasn't changed.
Right now. No.
He went from talking about unity, and then within minutes, he was back to blasting his opponents.
There's no unity. There's
no unity there. So he can't be consistent. He can't remain restrained. He has no ability to control himself. And that's what we saw there.
So that convention answered a couple of different questions for me. One, the traditional Republican Party, if it wasn't dead already, that was its official death date.
The death knell of the Republican Party.
Totally done.
The pre-MAGA Republican Party.
The pre-MAGA.
Do you know whose speech was my favorite?
Oh, God.
Because I was specifically, I'll give you a hint, I was waiting to see and hear her speech to see if it was anything like her 2020 speech at the RNC. On behalf of her not yet father-in-law.
Meghan McCain?
No, Kimberly Guilfoyle, Don Jr.'s girlfriend. Because you remember 2020, she spoke with such enunciation. She had her hands up, the best
like, he redeems you.
To come.
It's just like, good
So she had some of that still this time. She spoke in that very annoying, loud, obnoxious voice where she would overpronounce all of her words like this and say them. But I found it very humorous because these people have no concept of history. She compared at one point like this election to like the American forces storming the beaches of Normandy during World War II
to defeat
communism.
She's just an idiot.
We were there to defeat Nazism, not communism. I mean, these people.
And okay, I'm going to be a little misogynist and sexist here, but I think the situation calls for it. What Kimberly Guilfoyle's real skill set used to be her looks. She used to be married to Gavin Newsom. She used to be a very young, attractive woman. And it was that attractive package that made you listen to her. The package isn't attractive anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, what she's saying is just ugly and just gross. When I look at her, I look at somebody as, this is what 8 years of hanging out with the Trumps has done to
This is what MAGA does to people, yeah. I mean, the transformation, I think literally that's what you see
physical,
in people like her.
The mental, it's just, she is completely gross.
I mean, it's not unlike the physical and verbal transformation we saw out of Kristi Noem, trying to be in Trump's good graces. Like all these people, they take that on.
So the convention comes to an end. I think, again, not a ton. That was the lightest weight convention I can remember in a really long time. No real policy stuff. No real ex-party members or party leaders there talking about how the party's positioning itself, positioned in the past, maybe how it's moving forward. Dana White, Kid Rock, and Hulk Hogan were the main night. They all sucked. Republican conventions, I realize, are not for me, and I generally find them kind of weird and off-putting. This one hit a whole new level for me.
The only living Republican president, former Republican president, George W. Bush, was not there.
Yeah.
The former 2012 Republican nominee before Trump, Mitt Romney, was not there.
They
nor was Paul
nothing
Ryan.
to do with this.
Nor was Mike Pence, Trump's most recent VP. I mean, so that is, I think, most telling by who wasn't there. I think that tells you everything you need to know about this new party.
Was anybody there that wasn't MAGA? I mean, Mitch McConnell showed up, got booed.
Booed roundly, yeah.
Yeah, because for some reason he felt the need to tell you that Kentucky's delegates were for Trump.
I thought that was kind of hokey that he was the one announcing that. Why are you there?
If you're here you're just flat out kissing his ass.
That's all he's doing.
Great.
But it's also embarrassing for somebody like McConnell, who's
supposed to have some gravitas to him.
Right. And who was virulently anti-Trump after January 6th and said this is a bridge too far. And then he's completely capitulated to the point that, he's there, handing out his state's votes to Trump. Talk about falling from grace.
So that wraps up Thursday? And then Sunday afternoon, about 2:00, we get the big news.
Bombshell
Biden
news.
is exiting the race.
I first found out, actually, Biden's Facebook page. It popped up in my feed, his announcement via the letter. That's how I first found out. I think it was within minutes of when it was posted everywhere else.
So the Republicans and the Republican media is making a big deal about how this was done. And they're making a procedural argument. This wasn't done on White House letterhead. There was not even an official picture of him signing the statement that said he wasn't leaving. Where's the little video that just announced something? Why was it a two-part announcement where the first one is I'm leaving, and then he endorsed Kamala on Twitter? So these are things that I think the right is talking about in this bigger kind of rubric of there's a procedural problem here that we can talk about. And by that, I mean, what are those 14 million people that voted for Biden in the primary? Well, they're all going to be mad. This is anti-democracy. None of that shit applies.
No, they're making a process argument.
Yeah, no Democrat is listening to this.
And let me be frank,
not landing at all.
There were a lot of arguments that could be made for an open convention, but one of the arguments against that is you could really get into an argument that you're invalidating Democratic voters by choosing somebody. What you can say by nominating Harris is that people voted in the primaries for the Biden-Harris ticket, and I guarantee you most Democrats voted knowing that if Biden were to be reelected, that there was probably more than a 90% chance that Harris was going to have to take the vice presidency.
That she was in there somewhere.
So Democratic voters went into the voting booths with that knowledge because they voted for the ticket in the primaries, and so I think you can't undersell or undercount that, number one. And number two, the idea that somehow, this is, anti-democratic is rich, I think, coming from the MAGA Republicans.
Tell me if I'm wrong here, but didn't at a big level what happened is the president said, I'm not going to run for a re-election,
right,
and handed off his campaign to his vice president, the number 2 that he handpicked and is already in the executive office. Isn't that exactly
That's how it's supposed to work?
This is supposed to go?
That's exactly.
The Democrats did exactly what they were supposed to do. Number 1 has become incapacitated. He cannot see, and we'll get to this later about his speech, he may not be able to see how limited he has become. Party steps in, removes him, the VP steps into his place.
Well, this is
democracy.
It is democracy, and this is why these arguments are so disingenuous, because these are the same MAGA Republicans who are saying that Biden is too old to run, that he shouldn't be there, calling that for the 25th Amendment to be invoked. So you have congressional Republicans that weeks ago were saying Harris needs to invoke the 25th Amendment, get him out of there. Well, if that were to happen, then she would be running in his place anyway. And now you're going to be against it?
That would be the coup, right?
Right. That would be the ultimate
Your
coup.
number 2 rallied the troops to throw you out so she could be number 1. That would be more democratic than the number 1. Yes, being pressured to step down by the party, but stepping down and handing off to number 2?
That doesn't make sense.
I don't understand that. I think both of us have a pretty clear understanding, and both of us agree that this was the work of Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi did the heavy lifting in confronting Biden and forcing him to come to the realization, you are not going to win this election.
And I want to to highlight how critical Nancy Pelosi has been. And I think if you are a Democrat or even part of the Democracy Coalition like myself, who really want to see Donald Trump defeated, you should write a letter of thanks to Nancy Pelosi, because she single-handedly gave the permission structure for other Democrats to come forward and say, no, enough is enough. He needs to step aside. And I'll start with when she came out on television and she said literally within a day or two of Biden saying he was staying in the race, absolutely, unless Almighty God got him out of the race, Nancy Pelosi comes on TV and says, no, he needs to really think through this decision. We're going to give him some time to think through this. He had thought through it, but Nancy Pelosi knew what she was doing, and she was going publicly and saying, this isn't over yet.
I think on our politics text chain, wow, I'm struggling making words today, that Jason said, well, he said only God will kick him out. I'm like, well, in this scenario, God will be played by Nancy Pelosi, Barack Obama, and Bill Clinton. They represent God in this scenario.
The other thing that I thought was critical, again, giving a permission structure to Democrats in the face of some very pro-Biden, very aggressive, what has been termed as blue MAGA people who are very off-putting. Nancy Pelosi also came out and said it's a legitimate question to ask if what happened during the debate was an episode or a condition.
100%.
That's a huge statement. No other Democrat went as far as Nancy Pelosi in that verbiage, and that also emboldened other Democrats, especially in Congress, to come out publicly and say that Biden needed to step aside.
Contrast with what Nancy Pelosi did with the cowardice that Mitch McConnell has displayed
completely
over and over again. Nancy Pelosi is saying, I understand the role I play in this party. I understand what's happening, and for the good of the party, I'm going to step in. Mitch McConnell has had that opportunity multiple times and has never taken it out of sheer cowardice.
Yeah. That's a difference between leadership that is willing to do what's right, even going against many in their own party, versus Mitch McConnell, who just refused to do that.
And it does my heart so good to know that in a world where everything is changing, the old school dynamics of a political party still apply. A political party, to me, the CEO of the party is obvious, the president, if you have the presidency at that time. But every party, like every company, has a board of directors.
Right.
The board of directors are your senior folks who have been through the wars. And I was sitting at a board meeting at a small company I worked at. Brandon, you did some work for that company too, so context, so you know who we're talking about. And the chairman of the board of the small company looked at all of us and said, the board has one job: know when to fire the CEO. That's really what a board of directors does. When has the CEO reached the point that we've gone as far as we can under this individual's leadership? And that's what Nancy Pelosi did. The board of directors of the Democratic Party, which again, I make this up, but I'm pretty sure if you put Pelosi, Obama, and Clinton, that's somewhere close to what it is. They made a decision. It's time to remove the CEO. And thank God that
they did.
They were there and they still function in that way. Because if the Republicans had any sense or any type of these people still left in their party, we would be in a totally different place right now. So, Brandon, I think both you and I agree that Pelosi led the effort. She was the one that confronted Biden, told him, hey, you keep talking about your polling. Let's go over your polling. I mean, you just don't get to sit there and tell me, Pelosi, that your polling's good.
No, that was what was interesting. So details that the New York Times released from the phone call between Pelosi and Biden when Biden was sequestered in Wilmington with COVID, which again was just another reinforcement of like he doesn't have the wherewithal to continue this race in real time. He told Nancy Pelosi, well, that's not what my polls are saying. My polls show that I'm winning. And she's like, get Donilon on the line. Donilin's his pollster, personal friend. Get him on the line now. I want to talk to him. Clearly, she did not believe that, as none of us would. And, the good thing is that there was somebody like that was willing to confront him, because we heard all these stories that the Biden inner circle was insulating him from everything in public, that he was not possibly getting all of the accurate information he needed. They were, digging in. And it was very frustrating because one of the last things to happen on Saturday before the assassination attempt is that there was a call with Democrats where Representative Jason Crow of Colorado, moderate Dem, told him point blank, you need to step down. And Biden reacted indignantly. He yelled at him, basically said he didn't know what he was talking about. And so, that's basically the stalemate where we were at. And I honestly had started resigning myself to the point that, like, he may not step down. I
figured it was done at this point.
Yeah.
He was in. I mean, what I love about Nancy Pelosi, and every political party needs multiple people that can do this, where you walk into any room and you don't give a shit about who's there. You're not impressed by the presidency, the Supreme Court, none of it, because you've been
focused
here
on
so
winning,
long.
Focused on
I've seen it all. And she just tells them, guys, you can't bullshit a bullshitter. I've heard it all. I've seen it all. Don't think you're going to come in here and tell me, well, my poll, no, that's horse shit. And every party has to have that. And what makes the Democrats, where we've just said the Republicans as we know them are gone, and the Republican Party is in a bit of flux right now to that we don't know and they don't know what they are.
Right.
The reason for continuity amongst the Democrats is people like Nancy Pelosi.
I think that's exactly
and
right.
Thank God she was here.
What Nancy Pelosi did is also the difference between a healthy political party that's focused on the future and focused on winning, and an unhealthy political party that really doesn't function as a traditional political party in the system as much as a movement and as much as a personality cult. And so I think that's also the contrast that we see there, because a healthy political party would have stood up to Donald Trump in the way that Nancy Pelosi and other Democrats stood up to Biden.
Yeah, I agree. So this has to happen. Biden makes a statement. And one of the things that Fox and a bunch of the conservative media is still banging, that this was a coup attempt, or this was a coup against the sitting president of the United States. And why that is not going to make a damn bit of difference with voters is these are the same people for the past year and a half have banged the drum. He's completely senile and must go.
Yes.
So that's what they did. They got rid of him, and now you're saying, no, procedurally, they didn't do that right, and you should hold that against them. That
was the other point I was going to highlight, besides the fact that primary voters voted for the Biden-Harris ticket, knowing full well that Harris would probably have to step in. As those same Democrats, poll after poll, 55 to 65% said Biden should not be running again. Democrats. So again, this is in sticking with Democratic voters, with their wishes as well, because what you hear and see on social media, particularly from the loud Biden backers, is not reality. Poll after poll indicate that Democratic voters wanted Biden out. And so this was the Democratic statesmen and stateswomen listening to the voters.
Again, if she would have pulled the 25th Amendment on him, got the cabinet to bounce him out, which would be completely legitimate at this point.
It would
in time.
Be, yeah.
Only,
it's what the Republicans were calling for.
Only to then take the mantle of, come on, guy. Do you think there is any juice coming out of the squeeze with Democrats that Harris is culpable for the past 3 years? She's been lying to you for 3 years about the condition Biden's been in. Therefore, you should hold that against her now that she is the candidate for presidency. Do you think there's any validity in that? To Democrats. Now, I don't care about the people that aren't going to vote for Harris. To Democrats.
Not to Democrats. And I say that because I think that people understand the role of a VP.
Yes.
And I think you have to also realize that the VP is not there to usurp the president. They're not there to they're not the Speaker of the House. They're not the leader of the party. They are there to solely serve at the pleasure of the administration, to step in like if the president dies or is completely incapacitated. But their role is not to stage a coup against the president, to call them out. That's why you have people like Pelosi, like Clinton, like others. The VP serves completely at the pleasure of the president.
Yes.
And so, and again, and if we're real about VP responsibilities, the VP is a job that many people joke about because they don't really get to do a lot of substance unless the president allows it. And most of the time, the president does not. So they are.
What did Ben Franklin say? They're a warm bucket of spit.
I think that's right.
Something to that effect. That's how the constitutional framers saw the vice president.
Correct. Now, the only thing that Harris did get to do quite a bit, not this time around, but before 2022, was when there was a 50-50 split Senate. She cast a tie-breaking vote because that's ingrained in the Constitution. So, no, I don't think that argument won't have weight with Democrats, and I don't think that's going to really play well with the broader electorate because that's a process argument. I mean, if people are going to be focused on economic issues and on other issues, like that's not going to weigh at the top of their issue set when going into the polling booth.
So this is Sunday at roughly 2 p.m. Central. We get the word Biden's dropping out.
Yeah.
And in the next 48 hours, after Joe Biden's endorsement, Kamala Harris proceeds just to completely lock up the nomination.
Nothing short of remarkable. No. And I was following some of the discussion about how she gathered people. They were making calls for hours, rallying support. You saw the steady stream of Democratic heavyweights within the party. So people that would be considered her opponents in a contested convention coming out and endorsing her. And it was within 48 hours that she had locked up a majority of the delegates needed to win the nomination outright. Very remarkable.
Don't you think Nancy had a hand in that too?
Oh, I think probably.
I have a feeling Nancy made some phone calls to some people and says, I know you want to, but I'm telling you, don't. And if you do, I just basically ran the president off. If you think I can't to you, well, you'll just have to learn the hard way.
And I don't know anybody who would be more formidable or more than Nancy Pelosi if you get a call from somebody. I mean, she's the one who I would be more intimidated by her as a Democrat than anybody else.
Did you just catch the news at 2 p.m. Sunday? He left. Who do you think did that? I did.
Hello, that was me.
So she just starts off on this 48-hour run. What shocked me is in 48 hours, enough delegates pledged to her that she basically was in the exact same position as Biden was.
Yeah, and I did not expect it to go that smoothly, and I don't think anybody did. I think it's also notable that within a few hours, she had raised $80 million online. Within 24 hours, that was over $130 million. It was the most, I think, raised by Democrats in a single day since 2020, before 2020.
Then Act Blue dropped $150 million bomb on her. That was kind of a pre-donated amount. They were just waiting for Biden, I think, to go to release from somebody.
And all of the big donors that had closed their pocketbooks to Biden had announced, okay, we're opening them back up now.
In 48 hours, all 26 Democratic governors endorsed her, over 100 members of Congress, and I think 27 or 37 senators. It was done in 48 hours. Do you think that shows the invisible hand of Nancy Pelosi and other actors, or does that show just the desire to get Biden off the ticket?
I think it's a combination of both. I would say, number one, I don't think it would have gone as smoothly without Nancy Pelosi's involvement. You wouldn't have had that just trickle in of endorsements and how quickly she arrived at the delegate number without Nancy. It would have been more it would have been lengthened, the amount of time. We would have been talking about several days to a week, perhaps. So I think that you have to realize that. And I think, number two, though, I think there was a wariness among Democrats because the last 3.5 weeks that Biden put us through since the debate has been excruciating. This playing out in public, the trickle of people asking him to step aside, the agony. I mean, you could feel it in the voices of Democrats talking on television, whether it be pundits or elected officials. And the realization that we're losing crucial time. We're less than 100 days out before Election Day. And if this ticket is going to change, there's so much work to do to get somebody else and to get them up and going. And Democrats didn't want to be in a position where things got very messy. They would have a long drawn-out fight at the convention. There would be a lot of angry words, a lot of people that felt excluded. The coalition could come out of that fractured, and you could be in a scenario where the nominee didn't have all the support they needed because of how messy that was. And so, and the Democrats have not always been known for getting in line. They've been known for just being in disarray. So I think there was a very strong willingness to get in line, to wrap this up. And because I think people were just so breathing a sigh of relief that Biden finally did the right thing. And they're like, okay, let's do this. Let's unite. People wanted to unite. I mean, it had been 3.5 weeks of division. Let's unite. Let's get this done.
And just a couple of things to cover some Republican points that run the gamut of uninformed to straight gaslighting. The straight gaslighting one is Mike Johnson standing up and saying, and we will be filing lawsuits in states to keep her
Those
off
are not
the
going to
ballot.
go anywhere.
And somebody raised their hand and said, can you cite the law?
Yeah.
No, we can't. So that's total bullshit.
That's BS, yeah.
There's been no law broken. There's been nothing violated that says Harris, as the vice president, can't be on the ticket. That's just
a distraction.
Absolutely stupid.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing they can do. Now, this does change the whole paradigm of the Republican playbook when you have a campaign that was built around running against Biden as being senile, too old. They're scrambling now, and there's indication of that. Chris LaCivita and Susie Wiles, who head up the Trump campaign. And again, I think that, and you have been much more fatalist, I think. I've never been a fan of Kamala Harris, but you've been much more fatalist than I have of her and her chances and ability. But if you're going to come out of the gate strong, she's been in no better position to do that. We've already seen the polls start to change. So I think this gives credence to those of us who for weeks, if months now, have argued that anybody would perform better in the polls than Biden. We need somebody different. She has already closed the gap within a few points. Some polls she's leading. I saw there's a new poll out today. I think this was an ABC News poll that was also pretty telling. When Biden was in the race and they conducted the same poll, it was only 37% of Democratic voters said their vote was a vote for Biden rather than a vote against Trump. And already now at the gate, 50% said their vote is a vote for Kamala rather than against Trump. That's also key because when you have people that are resigning themselves to only vote for Biden to vote against Trump, but they have no confidence in Biden, it's hard to get those people out to the polls.
There is no doubt that we are in the sugar high phase of the Kamala Harris run.
And this is all pre-convention, too.
That's correct. And she has earned this.
Yeah.
The couple, 3 or 4 times she has been on camera, she's been good. She has knocked it out of the park. She has beat expectations to this point in her personal appearances. The race has not yet started yet.
True. I agree.
The two Trump folks admitted, hey, we got caught flat-footed this week. We thought we had at least a couple weeks of a food fight with Democrats to pick before they settled on a nominee. We didn't know 24 hours Harris would be there would be this much of a coalition behind Harris. So, yeah, we got caught a little bit flat-footed. But they've already kind of recovered from that. You and I started passing around to the group the whole, here are the 17 main points that we're going to hammer Kamala Harris on. Kamala Harris has not yet had to talk off teleprompter. She's not yet had to give an interview, and she has not yet done an unfriendly. That's when it will really, really
That's when
start.
she'll be tested.
That's when the campaign's going to start.
Yeah.
Do you remember her first on-camera interview after a very successful rally that kicked off her campaign? Do you remember what her first thing out of the chute was?
I don't think I do.
We're going to cancel the whole industry of private insurance. We're going to get rid of.
Oh, that's right.
And
we
she
talked
was
about
never
this
a serious candidate after that. When she just threw her hand up and made a little gesture and said, well, we'll just get rid of private insurance.
And then she flip-flopped on that.
It ended right there.
Yeah.
Because once again, the stage stuff with the production value looked great. You one-on-one making words with somebody, not good.
Yeah.
So while I have been encouraged for Kamala Harris, and let me say on mic, I am absolutely voting for Kamala Harris. The main criteria of me not voting for a Democrat at present's fallen away. We have a candidate that can serve all 4 years. And as a Democrat, as a lifelong Democrat, looking at the threat of Trump, that's all I need. So I am voting for Kamala Harris. So my commentary is, how can she now win the election?
Question, yeah.
And again, the campaign is really going to start when she sits down with somebody in an unstructured environment and has to deliver 40 to 45 minutes of content.
And I say this, the comparison, I think, in terms of how crucial this will be, I'm going to make a comparison to another interview that completely went south, but it makes me think of Sarah Palin with Katie Couric, and how that interview is what bombed the McCain campaign. And I think the first unscripted interview that Kamala Harris does like that is also going to be that crucial to a degree.
So if you don't think Kamala Harris can ruin her campaign in one interview, there's lots of evidence that says she can.
Oh, absolutely. But I will say I'm on a euphoric high now because I think the Democrats finally have a chance. They have a fighting chance, at least, which is great. Where before with Biden, despite what some people may say, like that election was over as long as Biden was on top of the ticket.
And on teleprompter, Harris has been way better than I remember her.
Yeah, the speech that she gave in Milwaukee this week, I mean, from a prosecutor standpoint, talking about how she locked up fraudsters and felons like Trump, and she's no different than the people she went after. Like, that's great. That's what we were missing from Biden. He couldn't articulate that case at all.
And I don't care about you prosecuting Trump. I truly and honestly wish you'd never mention that fat orange fuck's name again. But you have to, so I get it. For me, the Harris campaign starts. What are you going to do?
Yeah. What are your policies?
What is your policy? What is a policy priority to you right now? Do you still blanketly support the Green Deal, New Deal? Is that still in your thinking? Where do you stand on healthcare? Kamala Harris has a lot of questions to answer on policy, and my fear is she's just going to hang out on the anti-Trump side.
Yeah, I hope that's not the case. The pro for her is that she's really a blank book when it comes to a lot of this.
I completely disagree with that.
Really?
That's what they're trying to promote to you. No, Kamala Harris has very, very defined policy positions across the board. The reason why we're saying she's unknown is they're all horribly unpopular because they're all extremely progressive.
Well, to some extent, but that's if you're talking about her policy positions when she ran in 2020.
Which, that was, why wouldn't they be, she's going to flip-flop all of those now?
I'm not saying she's going to flip-flop all of them, but there are some of those positions, especially some of the key ones around healthcare and immigration, that can be reworked. Let
me ask you this. Is there any Kamala Harris policy proposal from her 2020 run that you would recommend she takes verbatim from what she was saying in 2020 and plug it into today's campaign?
Nothing comes to mind. Well, and honestly, I don't remember. I mean, you mentioned the big one, the big flip flop over healthcare. I don't remember really much of any of her other policy positions as part of the problem.
I can remember a lot of policy positions when she called ICE the KKK and said we needed to wipe out the ICE department altogether. When she talked about anybody who crosses the border, that is not illegal. That should be a civilian matter, not a legal matter. I mean, Kamala Harris's background is not good.
Yeah.
I forget the site that deleted it, but she was rated the most progressive senator during her time. All I'm saying is there is an ample ground for Republicans to make hay with if that's what they're going to do. And Kamala Harris is not going to get this free pass for 104 more days. She is eventually going to have to sit down and answer some questions and talk about things she has proposed.
And she also, I think, has to define herself very early on before the opposition defines her. Because, if Trump beats her to the point of defining her before she's able to do so, she's going to be running on defense the rest of the time.
So her positions up to this point don't define her.
They do to a degree, but not entirely. I think she has a place that she can come from in terms of being able to say, yes, on some of these things, this was my view in 2020. I've been in office now. I've been vice president. Being up close to the border situation, my views have evolved on this, and this is how and why.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a case to be made that.
I guess the point I'm making is I don't know a single policy position of Kamala Harris. Not one.
Well, that's the risk as well as the opportunity. That's, again, it's a double-edged sword.
Is that the strategy we're going to run?
Well, no, I'm saying she has to basically come out with views on those issues. She has to stake out views on certain high-button issues. But there are other issues where I think that, she doesn't have to go into the weeds where you have entire policy papers, but at least have a coherent argument in terms of where she stands. At this point, I would just settle,
what is Kamala's big three? What is she most passionate about?
Her platform. What is her platform?
What is the platform? Trump sucks for the 3 billionth time. Trump sucks. I get it. You're a prosecutor. Trump sucks. Get all of that.
And I don't know if you agree with this. In addition to her platform, Craig, I would also argue she has to find some way to create distance from the Biden administration and say, even though, yes, I was VP, I served with Biden, but I am running as my own person. I did not agree with Biden on everything. Here is where I disagreed. We need new generational leadership. I want to break with the past. This is how we do this.
I would love for her just to say what you just said. I want to make a generational break with politicians of the past, and I am something new.
And do you know why? Because somebody brought this up the other day, and I thought about it for a couple minutes and realized it was completely accurate. This election is the first election there won't be a Bush, a Clinton, or a Biden on the ticket since 1976. Since 1976, insane. We have had a Bush, a Clinton, or a Biden on the ticket.
This is where I think we've laid out a very viable path for Kamala Harris while running for president.
Yeah.
I do not believe she has the talent to execute that. That's always where my position on Kamala Harris has come from. And God damn it, I hate people who mispronounce her name on purpose. It's just a way to be disrespectful.
Yeah.
If I can learn to say Kamala, you can learn.
You can learn to say.
You can learn.
And see, I will disagree with you because I think she can rise to the occasion. I think it can be done. We've talked about this in the past, and I think many of her mistakes and her issues over the last 4 years have been self-induced, but I also think some of that has also been the Biden administration as well. I feel like they have not done her any favors, and they kind of cast her aside. They used her to win in 2020 and then pushed her off to the side, or they would give her hot-button issues that they knew that really, I mean, she could have solved on her own, but just wanted to do something, set something aside because they knew it was hot button. They didn't want it on Biden himself. So I think that there's a possibility here that she could rise to the occasion, stake out something on her own, completely different, do a reset from where she was in 2020 and decide, who do I want to be? What type of campaign do I want to run? And what is my platform going to be? This is the moment to do that.
I think they set the deadline of August 7th to name her VP.
Okay.
And I'm pretty sure it's going to be Shapiro or Kelly.
I feel like it has to be one of those two, yeah.
I don't care who it is. The job of the president and the executive branch is to make words. Whoever makes the best words wins the argument.
I have heard that Kelly is great on paper, that he's not a great talker.
He's just not dynamic. He's just kind of like, he's a great dude.
Yeah.
Military service, astronaut.
Husband of Gabrielle Giffords.
Great story, all of that. He just doesn't really kind of wow you in person. I don't give a shit really about wowing me.
No.
The bars come down so low. Can you take a thought, turn words, make a sentence, string 4 sentences together like Josh Shapiro and Mayor Pete can?
Right.
That's really, I think, what the criteria is moving forward.
And again, I also look at, can he bring Arizona into the blue column again? Josh Shapiro, I think, could easily bring Pennsylvania into the blue column because he has a 60% approval rating in the state. He's loved in the state.
Yeah.
And Democrats have to win Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. They can win without Arizona, but they have to win Pennsylvania.
So now it brings us in the timeline to last night's speech from President Biden. I didn't really have any expectations going in because it's a Biden speech.
Yeah, I didn't either. I had very low expectations.
You know what this is going to be. I was horribly disappointed. Brandon, I'm going to put that as one of the worst presidential speeches I've ever seen. I thought it was terrible. I thought the tone and the direction was completely off. And once again, it reminded me that if you overlaid Joe Biden and Donald Trump personality over each other, there's way more overlapping than maybe I want to give credit for.
Ego.
That was a narcissistic, ego-driven speech. And I don't know why an 81-year-old man who's been president, vice president, senator still feels an ambition to run for the presidency. I thought the whole thing missed the mark. It made me realize Biden's done. Don't need to hear from him again. He has one job left, introducing Harris at the convention. That's all. Stuff him in a hole. We don't need to see him for 6 months.
Well, so he spent very little time as well talking about Harris, which I thought was a missed opportunity.
He talked about his favorite topic, himself.
Yeah. He also missed another opportunity to explain to the American people why this election is so critical. I felt like that was under
or why he's dropping out.
Yeah.
I don't know why he's dropping out.
So again, it's the repeated failure to define the case for your candidacy. And this point, the failure to basically pump up your vice president to the American people.
Yeah.
Multiple failures. And I think this was only a 6-minute speech, and we've discussed this offline, but I don't think he can talk for longer than 5 or 6 minutes. He can't give like a 30-minute speech.
You've just used the word can't multiple times. Did you hear Biden indicate there's anything he can't do anymore?
No.
That he did. Have you seen him make a single concession to his age? Not one.
He has not.
That is an unrealistic, narcissistic, ego-driven approach that we're trying to get away from. And there's a cautionary tale for the Democrats about not getting involved in someone like Biden as we move forward.
Yeah, there needs to be a larger discussion going forward when it comes to our people in power and what we are going to do to force mandatory retirement ages, to ensure that we're not in a situation like this where you have somebody who is completely out of touch with reality in terms of their cognitive, mental abilities, being able to perform the job. Because, it should never get to a situation like this again. And I'm glad he did the right thing at the end, but he put the country, his party, through 3.5 unnecessary weeks of agony and torture, essentially. This was not good for his party, let alone the country, and it shouldn't have happened. It didn't have to happen this way.
That's the big thing. None of these last 3 weeks didn't have to happen.
I think he did a lot of reputational damage because I say this over and over again. When myself and others voted for him, he said he was going to be that bridge to generational change. And then in his interview, it was either Stephanopoulos or the interview after that, he said, well, I didn't mean it that way. I didn't really mean that I was going to just serve one term. Well, that's not how people who voted for you took that.
No.
And I think it's completely disingenuous to go back on that now and not come to grips with the idea that you had a central mission. There was a specific reason that the Democratic Party arrived at your nomination in 2020 and that the American people voted for you. It was very specific to the situation at hand. You did that job. Somehow you saw that as a mandate for another election when the American people did not see that as a mandate for another election.
Yeah, I think again, Biden will get locked up in the White House. We're not going to hear much about him, I think, until his next appearance will be at the convention. And I am expecting an absolute banger of a DNC.
I can't wait to watch this now. If there was not going to be any change, I was going to be I'll tune in for the highlights. Now, I want to see this live.
If Taylor Swift and Beyonce don't give a 5-minute montage of their music, and then John Legend ascend from a piano, and they saying "I'm proud to be an American," just a big F you to Lee Greenwood. That's the level of this I'm expecting. Celebrities are back involved, Hollywood's back involved, the music industry's back involved. This not only should
energy,
be
enthusiasm,
a convention, it should be a celebration.
Yes,
celebration is. We're only a few months away from getting rid of that turd. And that needs to be it over and over.
This is the focus.
This is a bit of a party.
Yeah.
If we have – so picture, Wednesday or Thursday night or whatever, the final night of the convention. It's Beyonce. It's high-end music. It's all of that. Biden comes out to what? A 5 to 10 minute standing ovation? Just to a roarous type of appearance.
Yeah.
He gives 10 minutes of Kamala, and if she can step forward and knock one out of the park, to me, that puts us rolling downhill a little bit.
I agree. I think then, we've entered the honeymoon phase, and then you see us bumping the polls. Like, you have the wind at your backs. And I think that's where, Republicans, just to contrast with their convention, they had an opportunity to go full unity and to remake their convention. They did not. They were not successful doing that.
Brandon, once again, we're thinking of Republicans, how we...
I know, again,
that's not that party.
That's not who they are.
That party does not exist. They don't give a shit about any of that.
Yeah, that's the difference.
Brandon, for the next 10 minutes of the podcast, the floor is yours to address Delta Airlines.
So I was flying on Friday when the whole global outage due to CrowdStrike happened, which I could do a podcast just on that issue, because I don't know about you, but I was familiar with CrowdStrike. I had no idea that basically every industry used them, from healthcare to banking and finance to airlines to hotels, that they were this global IT security supplier to basically every company that uses a Microsoft-based system. Their security patch had an inherent flaw that was somehow not caught internally by QA, validated multiple times. So Friday was chaos and a nightmare. I was stranded on connection in Salt Lake. And Delta flatly said that they were not issuing vouchers for food or for hotels.
Take a step back. Didn't you get trapped in the parking garage for a day because the arm wouldn't go up?
Well, I wasn't trapped in there all day, but
Okay.
I was trapped in a hotel parking garage because the arm, which was impacted by the back-end system.
So this outage impacted a parking garage.
It impacted a parking garage. So you had to press the call button, wait for somebody to come on, and manually to do a mechanism to force the gate up. You could not just go in and out with your ticket or with your hotel key card. So yeah, that was one impact. The airline apps were not working as well, so you couldn't rebook your own airfare. You had to go through chat support or phone. The chat support would start at 800-minute wait, go to 1,000, 1,225-minute wait. Insane. But I was told flatly by Delta that they couldn't issue vouchers for hotel or food because this wasn't an issue of their making.
No, Brandon.
I have since found out that I am eligible for a hotel credit, so I'm going to fill out the form and get that from Delta. But it was a nightmare. So, and then of course getting stranded, like everybody else is stranded. So then you're like looking and trying to book a hotel, and they're all becoming sold out like in real time because everybody's converging at once. Many people are sleeping at the airport. But yeah, everything impacted. The hotel apps were impacted. I usually check in from the hotel apps. I couldn't do that because that was impacted by what happened. So it was complete and utter chaos. And so my flight returning had been canceled. I had friends who had flights that were canceled that they could get booked on new flights for 5 or 6 days. That's how long they were stranded in some of these places. Because Delta said this, the second issue with Delta was that their crew tracking software is now out. That's why most of the other airlines have recovered and they
Same
have it. Same patch.
Okay.
And so basically what connects their pilots and their crews to specific planes and specific airports. So they were cutting and canceling 30 to 50% of their flights daily. And they were telling people, we'll rebook you on flights in 5 to 6 days because it's going to take us that long to get this under control.
I read something that within a 5-day span, they canceled like 5,400 flights. That's more than they had canceled the past 2 years.
Oh, completely. I mean, this was akin to a year ago or so when Southwest had an issue with their crew tracking software and like they just had their meltdown. But yeah, so Delta was a mess. And my flight kept getting delayed, my return flight, Delta. I ended up flying into a different airport entirely just so I wouldn't have to worry about not even arriving. And then leaving, I changed my flight, worked with somebody at Delta to do that at no cost, which thankfully they were doing. They first tried to charge me, and I said, listen, this is due to you. You're not going to charge me a fair difference.
Yeah.
And they finally agreed not to. And then when the flight kept getting delayed, it got delayed to the point that I was going to miss my connection again in Salt Lake, and I was going to have to spend another night in Salt Lake on my return. And so that's when I switched over, found I had a Southwest credit left, so I used that to book just a one-way return flight on Southwest, which actually was delayed 4 hours, but still left in time. I got to Kansas City after 1 a.m.
Yeah.
And it was an experience, and I would have, in normal circumstances, I would have mind delay and a couple extra days, but the 5 or 6 day thing was really nebulous, and it was still unknown whether or not I would get on a flight, and I didn't want to still stay with Delta and have to mess with that. I'm like, I'm going to let them have their time to sort this out, but I'm not going to wait for it. That's not going to be...
You've traveled enough to know that, when it gets to this level... 5 or 6 days, that's ridiculous.
It's completely ridiculous. I was just like, holy cow! Like I can't.
So you and I both come from the tech industry. We understand what cloud services are and how things can interact with a security vendor in the cloud. What I don't understand at all is the size and scale of this and how this impacted this many devices.
So global, yeah.
Because I know Microsoft has their own version of Amazon Web Services. I think it's called Azure or something. So is this something where somebody pushed a security patch and suddenly nothing could authenticate that used the Azure system? This is a great topic to go over and throw into AI with Jason.
Yeah, this would be great to talk at length about him and get into the weeds about what happened. Because just from I would say, visual standpoint and UI standpoint, it was revealing walking through KCI and all of the screens that are supposed to tell you when your flight is leaving, they all have the blue screen of death.
That's what, is that so? Anything with a Microsoft OS, basically, this patch hit. And just you couldn't authenticate through the system.
You couldn't. Yeah, it basically broke. Yeah, the system. That's a problem.
God, how many times have you pushed software in your career and knowing that? Did anybody test this? Is this going to work? And apparently there was no rollback ability either.
We had to wait for CrowdStrike to push a new update.
There's some things that you push, and it's like there's no rollback. There's only a path forward if this screws the pooch. But you typically put a little extra effort into making sure those things are solid.
Well, and that's the thing. I've pushed a lot of updates that are far less impactful, obviously, and far less, not as far-reaching, in terms of scale. At various software companies I've working with product managers, working with developers, engineers, and they always go through multiple stages of QA, multiple authorizations through all the way up to executive teams. Like it boggles the mind that something that's this critical could go out there with this type of major flaw and not be caught beforehand.
And damn it, Jason pooped on that article I said that said Southwest did get hit by this because they have Windows 3.1. I wanted that to be true so bad. 3.1 is 30 years old.
Yeah.
It's been retired for so long. Nobody runs on that.
There's a meme going around that says Southwest runs on Commodore 64.
Or thinking for a second, what a sweet move by Southwest. They're running off software that's 35 years old.
Yeah.
No, that's not a sweet move.
No, it's not.
But we could have a whole conversation about service and specific service to the airline industry.
Delta employees were frustrated. They were walking off the job at many of these airports because they were at their mental
these things
limits.
Only cost hundreds of dollars. These tickets, don't try to book that. Service has gotten so bad that as consumers, we think the best service is when we do it all ourselves.
Yeah, that's it.
And the airline industry was the first one to convince us that, what a really good experience with us? Never talk to us.
That's what it is.
Never. That's what we think service is.
That's
right
what
now.
Spirit Airlines has incentivized. I mean, they're the low-cost carrier. They're nickel and dime for everything. They apparently charge you now $50 if you need to ask their agent a question. If you need help with their ticket, if you need help putting your luggage in over a container, anything outside the bounds of what you do yourself, you have to pay them.
And most people think that it's good. If you go to the grocery store and do your self-checkout, or if you book your own flight or rebook your own thing, most people consider like that's an acceptable level of service now. I think that's totally sucks.
Yeah, I mean, we've been conditioned to think
We've absolutely been conditioned. And then with the pandemic, with a lack of people in the workforce at some of those jobs, it's gotten worse to now it's just embedded to doing it all myself and handling all of my own issues is how service should work, I guess.
Yeah, it's too bad because I think we're all just in such great need of wanting good service, and it's not there. And so when you have catastrophes like what happened on Friday and what happened with this most recent Delta meltdown, you realize just how critical that service is. And when it doesn't exist at all, like you're just in panic mode and nobody will step in. And so you're on your own to try to figure things out. And
you have an app now, Brandon, right? Well, you can do all this yourself.
The app is down.
That was our service to you. We made all this available to you so you wouldn't have to talk to me.
But no, it's glitchy too. And, or then you finally get a hold of somebody. When I was talking with somebody on Delta Chat, they were taking 15 to 20 minutes to just send me responses back.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I haven't heard from you from 30 minutes. They're like, yeah, we're still looking at this alternative flight for you, trying to get on an alternative flight. I'm like, well, I found the one. I screenshot it. This is the flight I need to get on. I just can't do it myself through your app because it's not working. Like, can you just book me through this? Yeah, right away, sir. 30 minutes later. Have you done it yet? We're still working on it. Like, what is like?
Just book. Just hit the button. I don't know. This is not something that's going to get better.
Yeah.
And I don't know what airline. Well, this one wasn't the airline's fault. I know Southwest has had some things, but can we do a tech audit maybe of the airlines and critical infrastructure and see if the government can help them out in some way by updating their tech?
I think there's probably plenty of opportunity to update tech and make them more responsive and more customer friendly. And
I think so.
It's not there.
I'm glad you made it home, though, Brandon.
Thank you.
That's our hour. Thanks, Brandon.
Thanks, Craig.
Thanks for listening to 2 Men in the Middle. Make sure to give us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. Check out our website at 2meninthemiddle.com. Drop us an email at 2meninthemiddle@gmail.com or tweet at us at 2 Men in the Middle. We'll see you next week.